Hello, and welcome to this webinar on project prioritization done the right way. My name's Stuart Easton, and I'm one of the founders here at Transparent Choice. And if you're one of our regulars, thank you for coming back. Good to see you again. If you're new to the Transparent Choice tribe, you're very welcome to join us. I always begin these things saying what a pleasure it is to be here as a founder of the company. It's always great to be able to share some of the things that we've learned on the journey with the wider community. So thanks for joining us. The title's kind of a funny one today: how to do project prioritization selection the right way. And right way is really emphasized. And the reason for that is if you hit Google and you go and do a bit of searching, you'll find all kinds of experts, let's call them experts, telling you how to do project prioritization. And I find this a little bit frustrating and slightly scary, because a lot of the content I see is at best vaguely interesting and at worst really dangerous, because it's, a lot of the material you can find on the internet around project prioritization is really not based on the research. And in fact, the research tends to undermine a lot of the recommendations that people are making, right? So people are actually out there recommending things that go against what the research tells you should be doing. So I wanted to do something that is research-based. So everything that we talk about today is going to be based on some kind of research. It's not just my opinion. It's not stuff I've made up. It's based on some kind of research. And then I just want to give you just a little insight, a little sort of visual tour of how to do it the right way. Now, of course, the research is not perfect. No research ever is. It's ongoing. It continues. And, this is what we do every day. We do project prioritization. And so we monitor the research, and we do that so that we can incorporate it into our product, into our processes, into our methods, and so that you don't have to, quite frankly. You can just join a webinar like this and get a nice little bite-sized version of best practice delivered to you in a nice convenient form. So that's my goal today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the product demoing it. The only reason we're going to touch it at all is really just to illustrate some of the points that we're going to talk about. So those points are, why does prioritization matter? Why don't current tools, why don't they work? What does work? We're going to look at the cost of poor prioritization, and then we'll wrap things up. And somewhere in the middle there, we'll just take a look at a couple of bits of software. We're not going to do, as I said, not going to do a full demo today. If you want that, just reach out to us, and we'll certainly point you at resources where you can get that full demo. So let's dive in. Why does prioritization matter? Well, to answer that, you've got to think about the question, why do projects matter? And your projects, oops, there we go, that's it. Your projects exist, and the project portfolio exists for one reason and one reason only, and that's to help you achieve your strategic and your business goals. That's it. That's the only reason they exist. Some of those goals, people, when I say things like that, people often come back and say, well, actually, Stuart, we have some compliance projects. Well, one of your business goals is to stay in business, and to stay in business, you have to be compliant. So that is just achieving your business goals. So that's the only reason that you have projects. But the thing about goals is that the word goal implies you're not there yet. So something has to change, and the way that we achieve that change is through projects. Projects enable the change that allows you to achieve your business goals. So if you follow that through, what that means is that if you're doing the wrong projects, it means you're hitting the wrong goals. You're going in the wrong direction. You're not going towards your business goals. You're going in some other direction. And fundamentally, that's why project prioritization matters. So do the current methods work? Now, of course, I've kind of done a bit of a spoiler on this one. They don't. So let's take a quick look at what some of those methods are. My favorite is project pitches. So this is where you get a bunch of execs in a room. and then people come in one after the other, and they pitch their idea, they pitch their project to the executive team, and then somehow magically the executive team decides which project should be done. This is probably the worst way that you can possibly select projects. If you're doing this in your organization, please stop. It really is very destructive. When you do this, projects that get approved are the projects that have been sold best, or where the person requesting the project has got the most political influence, or whatever it may be. They're certainly not being selected because they are helping you achieve your business goals. They may be helping people achieve their career goals, but that's a different thing. So if you're doing this, please stop and do something else. The next common method that we see is using return on investment or some other financial metric to select projects. On the face of it, this sounds quite sensible. And certainly financial contribution is an aspect, is one component in selecting projects. But if you're just using financial aspects, chances are your projects are pointing all over the place. You can have a positive ROI that takes your company in completely the wrong direction strategically. So if your strategic goal is to be the high service, the best service provider that's charging the premium price, and someone comes up with a great ROI on a project that's going to cut cost by reducing inventory, and suddenly all your customers leave you because you can't supply them, then that's taking you in the wrong strategic direction. It may make ROI sense, but it doesn't make strategic sense. So if you're just using ROI or other financial measures, please stop doing that as well. You need to include other strategic goals in there. Which brings us to the next three are sort of different flavors of the same thing, which is, let's get some criteria, let's score projects against those criteria, and give ourselves a score, give each project a score rather, off of that, and use that to prioritize. And unfortunately, that doesn't work terribly well either. And we're going to talk about why that doesn't work a little bit later on. It's the right idea, but it's the way that you implement it that makes a difference. All right, so we'll come back to that in a little while. But first of all, Stuart, you said this was going to be a research-based discussion, and so what's the research tell us about whether or not these methods work? Well, here's the first thing. This is data from the PMI. And basically, what they looked at was, across all portfolios, all industries, all sectors, all geographies, a typical portfolio will have 20% of the projects being so badly aligned that they should be stopped tomorrow, I think was the phrase. It was something like that. They should be stopped tomorrow. They're so badly aligned. Now, to me, there's a word for that, which is waste. These are projects we should just not be doing. And at the same time, half of the projects out there are not resourced properly, right? So we're wasting 20% of our resources, and at the same time, we're not resourcing half of our projects appropriately. And if you want to guarantee that a project will fail, then under-resource it, right? It's the easiest way to guarantee failure of a project. You'll end up with cost overruns or delays or just outright failure. All right, so clearly something is broken in the way that organizations are selecting their projects. This isn't something that's that should be terribly contentious. So what is it that is going wrong in the current toolkit that we looked at, in those, particularly in those priority matrices and the scoring spreadsheets and things? Well, there are three main things that we see. So this is the one bit of the presentation that I'm not sure I have really good research to back up, but this is based on our experience working with customers. Actually, this first one, we have some very good research backs this up. Strategic alignment is one of the most important drivers of your overall organization success, right? Period, the end. There's quite a lot of research papers on this. If anybody's interested in seeing those, I can supply them. But what's really key here is that it's not just alignment to the strategy, it's alignment of people. So if you imagine your executive team, they're going to have, the different people around the table are going to have a very different view of what is strategically important. The sales team, the sales VP, is going to think that anything to do with revenue is the most important thing. The operations guy or the manufacturing VP, he's going to think that efficiency is the most important thing. And so they are valuing projects differently. They're valuing activities that the company should be investing in differently. They perceive different value. And if you don't get them aligned, if you don't get your executives, your people aligned about what the strategy is, what the trade-offs are you need to make, then any portfolio you come up with will be fundamentally flawed. The second thing that the normal tools don't really have is a process, right? If you have a scoring spreadsheet, that's a document. It's not a process that lets you consistently evaluate your projects. It's not a process that lets you pull in your stakeholders and people around the organization who have knowledge, who can help you make this decision to assess your projects more effectively and more accurately. Okay, so you need to have a process, not just a document. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is that you need balance. So this is kind of the first one is kind of obvious, where you need to balance the number of projects, the demand that you have, and the resources you have to deliver it. And this is the biggest problem people have when they come to talk to us, typically, is that they have too many projects or not enough resources. It's the same thing. So you have to balance those if you want to successfully deliver projects. But you also have to balance KPIs across the organization. So there's no point putting all of your resources into quadrupling sales if then you're not able to meet your delivery time KPIs or some other KPI. Okay, so you need to be thinking about balancing across your KPIs in the organization. And you also need to think about balancing the activity across departments in the organization. There's absolutely no point putting together a portfolio of projects where all of the projects have an impact on your customer service team in August, because those people will collapse, right? They just can't absorb all that change. And by the way, at the same time, even though your customer service people are collapsing because you're throwing, so many projects are hitting them, you might have another team, the finance team, for example, that's sitting there twiddling the thumbs with no projects coming, just chugging away with their work. They could absorb more projects. So you're always trying to balance between, the biggest strategic impact with deliverability, with making sure that you're spreading the benefit across the organization in a way that optimizes your success. So you need to be able to see all of that and do all of that to be able to prioritize projects effectively. And the one of these three that is the foundation for everything else is this alignment one. And if you don't do that well, all the spreadsheets in the world won't save you. And this is where prioritization matrix fails. This is where PPM tools typically fail, and so on and so forth. Now, the good news is that there's been a lot of research over the last couple of decades into that particular point, this thing about alignment. How do we get there? But actually, before we jump to that, I want to talk about that alignment thing a little bit, because people sometimes say, well, really, Stuart, we've put together a spreadsheet and it's got a bunch of criteria, and those criteria, surely they represent our strategic alignment. And yes, they should. But this is what really happens. So, you've got yourself a bunch of criteria for prioritizing, and you put them all up on the whiteboard and you pull together the leadership team. And the CEO says, yeah, I think that first criteria is worth 23.7% of the weighting. Now, the first thing to note is that numbers come from nowhere. It's just a number that's come from the subconscious of his or her mind, and again, the research suggests it's a fairly meaningless number. But let's set that aside for a moment, because what happens next is really interesting. Everyone else in the room stops thinking about what the right number is and why, and they start thinking about, shall I take on the CEO? Is that a politically clever thing to do? So suddenly this is about politics and game playing, and it's not really about having a meaningful discussion about those criteria weights. And so that means that everybody leaves the room knowing that the scores are wrong, that the weights on the different criteria are wrong in your wonderful spreadsheet. And what that means is that they just don't believe or trust any of the scores that you put out there. And so they end up just making the decision in the normal politically driven way that they always have. And you're going to get the same results: 20% waste, 50% overcommitted, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of research into how you fix that problem, and it's been going on over several decades. And back in 2017, I think it was, the University of New South Wales pulled together a lot of that research, the last couple of decades of research, into over 100 different methodologies for prioritizing projects. And they came to the conclusion that only 2 methods were suitable. One method was called something called DEA. It's kind of difficult to use, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The other is something called AHP. I'm not going to go into detail about what AHP is today, but that's the one that we've put at the heart of our prioritization tools. And it's the one I would recommend to you. So, the quick way of thinking about this is that best practice equals AHP. So go out and get yourself armed with a good AHP-based prioritization tool, whether it's ours or somebody else's. So what is it in the AHP process that makes a difference? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go and show you in software what this AHP thing looks like. Excuse me. So we start off with a set of criteria. Okay, so this is, in a way, it's a bit like that weighted spreadsheet, that priority matrix, where you have some criteria. We're going to weight the criteria and then score your projects against those criteria. Okay, so conceptually it's similar. It's how you do it that matters. So the first thing to notice is that in this AHP piece, the H of AHP is hierarchical. So your criteria can be hierarchies of criteria. And this is really important because that's how the real world is. Risk isn't made up of one thing, it's made up of several components of risk, and you need to be able to evaluate that and bring that together. So you create a little hierarchy of criteria, and then comes the magic. Then you pull your executive team together, and sorry, give me one second. You pull the executive team together, and they are never asked, what weight should I put on a particular criterion? Instead, what happens is that they are asked, is criterion A or criterion B more important? And so if we say criterion A, cost reduction, is more important, how much more important? Is it a little bit more important, a lot more important, or really absolutely the most important thing ever? And this is working to overcome a lot of the biases. The way this structure happens, it's overcoming a lot of the biases that we all carry as human beings, and helps you get to a better decision. But more importantly, it's a team sport. So you'll see down here we have a number of people who are participating in this, and I've opened one of these on my device over here. So I'm voting in real time. This is how you'd have it. You have a bunch of guys and gals sitting in a room with their smartphones or their tablets, answering these questions in real time. And what that lets you do then is have a discussion. Once everybody's answered, you can reveal these votes to the team, And you can have a discussion along these lines. You can say, oh, look, these people seem to agree, but David here has a very different view. You know, David, can you explain why you voted over here? And Brian, can you explain why you voted over here? And what happens is a little bit of magic. Some of the knowledge from David's brain makes its way across to Brian's brain and to George's brain. And they listen to each other and they learn about the whole business. Instead of just learning about their particular stovepipe, they're starting to learn about other people within the business and what's important to them. And they have a discussion and they come to an agreement about what the right trade-off between these two things is. So two things have happened here. The first thing is that that knowledge has moved from one person's brain to the other. So the quality of decision making has gone up. But at the same time, because of this discussion, the level of buy-in is increasing as well. Okay, so the quality of the decision has gone up and the level of buy-in and commitment has gone up. This is the opposite of what happens when you talk about criteria weighting in a priority matrix or a spreadsheet-based system. And this is kind of the secret sauce within AHP, if you like. And so at the end of that, you end up with a set of weighted criteria. Now, if you remember, the second thing so that's the first thing that we talked about, is the foundation, the alignment, strategic alignment. Get the people aligned around the business goals first. So that's how you do it in AHP. The second piece we talked about was having a process for evaluating projects. So within Transparent Choice, we do that as a Kanban. Again, if you're just working in a spreadsheet, you don't have this. You may be sending emails around and copying and pasting things and doing all kinds of stuff, but it's not a clear, consistent process. So what you can do, and what I would recommend you do, whether it's in Transparent Choice or something else, is set yourself up a clear process that you take projects through. And the goal here is to collect at each step in this process, each stage of this Kanban, we're going to collect information about the project. We're going to score it against the criteria. We're going to do a risk assessment. We're going to estimate how much resource it needs. We're going to look at what this project might contribute to our KPIs, things like that. And we're going to do that consistently. And within this Kanban, what we're also doing is setting up automated emails. So when a project reaches risk assessment, the system will automatically send out an email to your subject matter expert on risk, probably a senior project manager or something like that. They can fill in the form, and that data is automatically included in the system. So all the data is this tab here is one of the projects that's in the pipeline right now, and you can see all of the data that we're collecting over on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you can see an audit trail. So you can see we changed the level of risk from medium to high. And you can see that I made that change earlier this month. So you've got a complete audit trail. You can see here one of the emails that we sent out with a link to a form that someone, and that I think is probably a form that you can use to evaluate risk or something like that. So the value of having this kind of really clear process is that it's consistent. It's not biasing your decision based on who's requested it. A well-designed process, you can also be weeding out the bad projects early, right? Because it takes energy to evaluate projects. So you can be weeding out the bad projects early, and then getting to the position where you have decision-ready projects where they're decision ready and you have the answers, you have the information that the executives need, and it's consistent. So that ability to have a process around evaluation is really important. And of course, it's transparent as well to project requesters. And then the final bit was about balance, right? How do we pick a portfolio that is strategically aligned, but that also balances budget with resources and all those things. So so it's really helpful. And again, this is what you get within Transparent Choice. You have the ability to build these dashboards, but you could do this in other ways as well. But this is a very effective way of doing it. We have, I've set this up so that we have the value, right? So that's the score that the project's got against investment. So good projects live up here. These are high value, low investment. That's good value for money. Projects over here are low value, high investment, right? So these are bad projects. These are low value for money projects. So we want to be doing these ones and not those ones. So this helps take the politics out of the whole process. And the key thing is, because the executive team had that meeting where they went through all those criteria and they built, they did all that pairwise comparison, they know and trust what this value score means. So they don't just ignore it and start trying to jam their own projects in, which is kind of what tends to happen with priority matrices and so forth. Now, at the same time, of course, as we're adding projects, we want to know what would happen to our budget if we added projects. How does this change our ability to hit our KPIs? Do we have enough people to deliver these projects? So you can track all these things and give the executive team real-time answers, right? This is the key thing. This is whatever tools you use, you need to be able to give them these real-time answers, not say, oh, well, I'll come back to you in a week, right? That's no good. We're trying to make a decision. We're trying to do it quickly, and we're doing it with people who've got very short attention span. So we need to be able to answer these questions straight away. And of course, we can also see how our portfolio is spread across the different departments, or across different themes, or whatever it is that's important to you. You can do that within transparent choice. So this is what good looks like. And again, we're not the only vendor out there. There are other organizations that can help you do this, but this is what good looks like: being able to answer those questions in real time, having been through a good process for evaluating the projects, and having used AHP, and that really is the foundation, having used AHP to weight and to create the criteria model, that scoring model. Right, let's jump back to the slides. And as I said, I don't intend to do a full demo today. We will. There are lots of other videos that we have online to do that. What's it worth doing better prioritization? Well, fundamentally, what we're trying to do is eliminate waste. So if you look at this, we've got good strategic fit on the vertical axis, and how well is your project going on the x-axis there. And most organizations have got projects in all 4 quadrants. And anything at the bottom here is waste, right? These are projects that just aren't aligned. They're not adding strategic value. But there's also potential waste up here. These are projects that are important, but that could fail because they don't have adequate support and focus. So by killing these bottom projects, right, the real way, right, that's a saving. That's a monetary saving, a money saving in its own right. But more importantly, you can take that resource and invest it up here and convert these important projects into successful projects, right? These at-risk projects, make them successful. That's really what this is worth. So if you imagine, let's put some numbers on that. You imagine you're running a portfolio that's about $10 million worth of spend, and that you're an average portfolio. That means you've got 20% of your projects that you shouldn't be doing. Right? So that means out of your 10 million, you've got 2 million of bad spending going on. So if you improve your project prioritization process, let's say you can halve that, right? We'd hope to do much better than that, but let's say we only halve the amount of bad spending that goes on, right? We're going to avoid spending money on those bad projects. That's $1 million a year that we saved. But it's more profound than that, because you're going to take that money and you're going to redeploy that money and resources onto the projects that are going to add even more business value. So there's typically you'd expect to see multiple millions of dollars of extra business value generated, simply because you're deploying your resources much more intelligently on the things that really matter. And that's the difference that real project, good project prioritization allows. And what's really key here is putting in place proper project prioritization isn't free. A spreadsheet is free, but it does cost time and money and a little bit of effort to do the job properly. But you're going to get many more times back, the value back, than you put in. We're typically doing ROI calculations for prospects where they're getting 10 times, 10, 20, 30 times. They're expected to get 10, 20, 30 times their investment back. So it really is a good way to invest a little bit of time and energy. You get a tremendous return from that. So just in summary, we talked about how alignment, process, and balance are the kind of the three enablers, if you like. And we looked at how, what that looks like in software, so you have something to judge by. And we talked about the business case and how strong that is. So, if you want to do something about it, I would watch for the email. Our marketing lead, Preeti, who's going to be joining us in a second for the Q&A, I hope. Our marketing lead, Preeti, will be sending out an email as soon as all the videos tidied up. Watch for that email, and in there there'll be an invitation to come and arrange a demo, so you can come and look at our stuff, or go to our website, which you can see here, and go to the ultimate guide for project prioritization. There's a load of stuff on there that's really helpful to get you started. Again, whether you use our software or not, that information is all freely available on our website. So go and do that. Get yourself a demo, and then once you're educated a little bit, engage the executives in this discussion. Ultimately, they're the users of this tool, and it's about helping them understand the value that they're going to get from this, how this will help them accelerate their business, help them accelerate and more eliminate risk from their execution of their strategy. And there are very few executives who are going to turn that proposition down. So that's about it from me today. I went a few minutes longer than I'd anticipated. Apologies for that. But Preeti, if you're there, do we have any questions from the team?
Hi, Stuart. Thank you for this informative webinar, and thank you everyone for joining in today. I hope you found it useful, and if you've got any more questions, please do share it. Well, Stuart, I've got about 4 or 5 questions coming your way.
Okay.
You're ready when you are.
Yep.
The first question is, how can I build my model?
That's a good question. So that's a whole webinar on its own, and in fact we did one a couple of months ago with a gentleman called Roberto Camano. He's a real expert in the area of project prioritization and how to use AHP. So what I would recommend is go to our website, search for if you type in transparent choice criteria project prioritization criteria webinar, I imagine that'll come up pretty quickly. It's also in the resources section on our website. And it will tell you how to think about structuring your portfolios, how to come up with a criteria model that makes sense, how many criteria you should have, what the definition of a useful criterion is, what kind of scales you should use to evaluate, to score the projects against criteria, and it's all in that 50-minute webinar. So I'd recommend you go and watch that one.
Fantastic. I think some of the questions were related. So I had someone ask me how many criteria should be used, like that. You've already answered it. There's one interesting question. They say, we use a PPM tool. Is your software compatible?
The answer is yes. Generally, what we find is that most organizations will prioritize the portfolio, the overall portfolio, once or twice a year, and then just review it every so often, at the monthly or quarterly portfolio review meetings. So really all we do is we pass information back and forth between us and the PPM tool to make sure that we have the, we have the up-to-date level of effort information and things like that. So yeah, it sits alongside really nicely PPM tools.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. There's one more which says we've a client in New Zealand. Okay, it's a long one. Right. So basically they're asking, we'd like to partner with you. What is the process to it?
Great. What I would recommend you do is go to our website and go to the contact form, fill in the contact form, and somebody will get back to you typically within a business day to get a conversation going. We partner with companies around the world, and we're always looking for more partners. We like to add value for you and help you build your business. So look forward to speaking with you.
Great. And one last question there for the day. Can we use this software in pharmaceutical industry?
Yes, is the simple answer. Interestingly, in the pharmaceutical industry, there are often extra criteria that people like, or common criteria that come up, depending what you're using it for. If you're using it for drug discovery and prioritizing that work, for example, then your model will often involve things like the market size, potency, competition, regulatory barriers, things like that tend to show up in that space. So yeah, you can absolutely use it in life sciences.
Great, thank you. That's all from me.
Fabulous. Thank you, Priti. So it just remains to thank everybody for joining us. Do reach out and with any questions, and do check out the Ultimate Guide and all the online resources that we talked about. They're free for you to access. Whether you use our tools or not, they hopefully will help you become better at prioritizing projects.